Grandpa, Mum and Dad are going to steal your fortune tonight after dinner." My grandson Leo whispered, his voice barely a tremor in the air, while everyone else was distracted in the kitchen. His 9-year-old eyes, usually so full of light and mischief, were now gleaming with a mixture of fear and urgency that sent a chill straight through my bones. The clatter of plates being set on the dining room table faded into a dull, distant noise as I processed those words that had just shattered my world. Leo shuffled closer to my armchair, pretending to fuss with the laces on my shoes while the adults continued their preparations for the special dinner Eleanor had been so insistent on organizing. "I heard them last night, Grandpa," he continued, his breath warm against my knee. "Mum and Dad were talking low in their room. They said after we eat, when you're tired, they're going to make you sign some papers to take all your money." My heart, a steady drum that had beat for 75 years, seemed to stop for a moment. All those years of life, 40 of them in a blissful marriage to my beloved Clara, who now rests in peace. And I never once imagined I would hear something so monstrous from the mouth of my own grandson. The house, the very home I had designed and built with my own 2 hands, suddenly felt colder, alien. The portraits on the walls, the family photographs capturing decades of smiles, all felt like they belonged to someone else's life. "Are you sure about what you heard, my boy?" I asked, my voice a strained whisper, struggling to find a calm I did not feel. Inside me, a hurricane of disbelief and profound pain was raging. Leo nodded with a solemnity that no child his age should ever possess. "Yes, Grandpa. Dad said they had everything ready, that they just needed your signature. And then they said something about a home for old folks." Those words drove into my chest like sharpened daggers. A home for old folks. After building a fortune of over $3 million, working day and night in my artisanal furniture business, after providing a comfortable life for everyone, after paying for Eleanor's university degree and helping her with the down payment on the very house she now lived in with Marcus, this was their idea of gratitude. From the kitchen, I could hear Eleanor's laughter. It was a sound that once filled me with pure joy, but now it sounded hollow, calculated. "Dad, come sit down. Everything's almost ready," she called out with that exaggerated sweetness she'd been using for the past several weeks. It all made a sickening kind of sense now. The more frequent visits, the special dinners, the lingering hugs, the questions about my bank accounts disguised as filial concern. Leo squeezed my hand with his small, warm fingers. "Grandpa, don't let them hurt you. You're the only one who really understands me." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of despair and giving me a sliver of strength. This child, my grandson, was the only person in this house who loved me unconditionally, without some hidden agenda. He was the only one who cared enough to read me stories when he came to visit. The only one who showed genuine interest in my tales about his grandmother Clara. The only one who truly listened when I spoke. "Don't you worry, Leo," I whispered back, ruffling his hair. "Grandpa knows how to take care of himself." But inside, my mind was already racing, gears turning at a speed they hadn't reached in years. If what my grandson said was true, I had only a few precious hours to mount my defense. The dinner was almost ready. I could smell the rich aroma of the beef bourguignon, Clara's signature recipe, a dish I adored. But now, that beloved scent was tainted with the bitter taste of betrayal. Marcus appeared in the living room doorway, flashing that wide, toothy smile that had never quite reached his eyes. "Arthur, how are you feeling? Eleanor's just finishing up your favorite dish. It's going to be a very special night." The way he emphasized very special was all the confirmation I needed. Leo had heard correctly. This wasn't the paranoia of an old man. It wasn't my imagination running wild. It was real, terrifyingly real. I'm feeling wonderful, Marcus. Just wonderful, I replied, forcing a smile I hoped looked genuine. Leo gave my hand a discreet squeeze, a silent message that he was on my side, that no matter what happened, he wouldn't abandon me. In that single moment, I knew I wasn't just fighting to protect my fortune. I was fighting to protect this incredible child who had found the courage to warn me about the treachery brewing under my own roof. My mind began to connect the dots, replaying events I had previously dismissed. Just last week, Eleanor had come over with a stack of papers, claiming they were to better organize the family finances. I had refused to sign anything without my lawyer present, and she had become visibly annoyed, though she tried her best to hide it. Now I understood why she'd been so insistent about this dinner tonight, why she'd made my favorite meal, why Marcus had brought that bottle of expensive single malt scotch he knew I loved. Their plan was perfect in its cruelty. After a hearty meal, with a little alcohol in my system, when I was relaxed and unsuspecting, they would present me with the documents. They would probably tell me it was just a formality, something to protect the family. And in my post-dinner state of contentment, perhaps I would have signed without reading the fine print. Then the consequences would follow. The draining of my accounts, the sale of my properties, and finally, the retirement home where they would leave me. Conveniently out of sight and out of mind. But Leo had changed everything. My little grandson, with his pure, untainted love, had saved me from falling into the most painful trap of my life, a trap laid by my own daughter, the little girl I had raised with so much affection, the one I had educated with the best values I knew, the one I had protected and doted on for her entire life. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Leo asked, noticing I had drifted off into my thoughts. His eyes held a genuine concern, a stark contrast to the calculating glances I'd been receiving from the adults. "Yes, my boy, I'm more than okay. Thanks to you, I'm perfect." Eleanor's voice called from the kitchen, announcing that dinner was served. It was time to deliver the performance of a lifetime. To pretend I knew nothing while I watched every move, every gesture, every word of the people who were plotting to dismantle my life. But now I had an advantage they hadn't counted on. Knowledge, and more importantly, I had time to prepare my counterattack. The table was set with the lace tablecloth Clara had embroidered decades ago. Its delicate threads now seemed like silent witnesses to purer, more honest times. I took my usual seat at the head of the table, the same spot where I had presided over family dinners when my wife was still alive. Leo sat to my right, as he always did, while Eleanor and Marcus took their seats across from us. "Dad, you look so well tonight," Eleanor said, serving the rich, dark stew with that practiced smile that I now recognized as a mask. "I've been thinking about you so much lately, about how to take better care of you now that you're all alone in this big house." Her words were coated in sugar, but each syllable carried the venom of deceit. I watched her hands as she served the food, the same graceful gestures she had learned from her mother, but now stripped of the genuine love Clara had put into every action. Eleanor had inherited her mother's elegance, her slender hands, the way she tilted her head when she spoke, but she had not inherited her noble heart. "The house doesn't feel big, my dear. Every corner holds a memory of your mother, and that keeps me company," I replied, watching as Marcus poured the scotch into my glass with particular generosity. More than usual, I noted. It was all part of the plan to relax me, to lower my defences. Leo glanced at me from the corner of his eye, while pretending to focus on his plate. The maturity of this boy was astounding. How he managed to keep this terrible secret without his parents suspecting a thing. He reminded me of myself at his age, working in the wood shop with my father, learning that sometimes you have to be quiet and observe before you act. "Leo, tell your grandfather about your report card," Marcus interjected with that strained, booming voice he used when he wanted to play the part of the perfect father. The boy began talking about school, but I could see his parents exchanging significant looks over his head, glances that clearly said, "It will be time soon." As I slowly chewed a piece of tender beef, my mind drifted back to the early days of my workshop. I had started with just $500 in my pocket and a dream of giving my family a better life. 40 years later, that small investment had grown into a $3 million empire of property, patents, and investments. All of it built, shaving by shaving, sacrifice by sacrifice. I remembered the nights when Eleanor was a little girl, staying up late to wait for me after my long days at the shop. How she would run to the door when she heard my truck in the driveway. How she would curl up in my arms while I told her made-up stories about enchanted forests and talking animals. When did it all change? When did that love curdle into greed? "Do you remember, Dad, when you used to take me to see the furniture you were building?" Eleanor asked suddenly, as if she had plucked the thought right from my mind. "You always said that everything you did was to secure our future." Her eyes shone with what might have passed for nostalgia, but I could now see the careful manipulation behind every word. "Of course I remember," I answered calmly. "I also remember when you graduated with your business degree and told me you wanted to follow in my footsteps, to build beautiful things for families. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Now, she wanted to tear our own family apart for money." Marcus cleared his throat and launched into one of his rehearsed speeches about the current economy, about the importance of family estate planning and securing financial stability for the next generation. Every word was another step toward the moment they would produce their prepared documents. Leo accidentally dropped his fork, and as he bent down to retrieve it, he seized the opportunity to whisper, "The papers are in Dad's briefcase in the car." My grandson hadn't just overheard their conversation. He had been investigating on his own. He was braver than I ever could have imagined. "Dad, have you thought about updating your will?" Eleanor asked with feigned casualness as she collected the dinner plates. "I mean, not that it's urgent, but at your age, it's good to have everything in order." There it was, the first direct probe into the subject that truly interested them. "I have a will, Eleanor. Your mother and I made one the year you were born," I replied, watching her expression tighten ever so slightly. She clearly hadn't expected that answer. They probably thought I was a careless old man who hadn't put his legal affairs in order. During dessert, a chocolate torte that Clara used to make for birthdays, I noticed Marcus glancing at his watch. 9:30. They surely had the exact moment for their plan's execution, timed to the minute. Leo let out an exaggerated yawn, pretending to be tired, but his eyes remained sharp, watchful. The conversation grew more intimate, more familial. Eleanor started reminiscing about childhood anecdotes, sweet moments we had shared when she was an innocent girl. Each memory felt like a dagger, because I knew she was wielding them as emotional weapons to soften my heart before the final blow. "Dad, you know we love you very much, don't you?" Eleanor said, her hand reaching for mine across the table. Her fingers were cold, nervous. "Everything we do is because we care about you, because we want what's best for you." Her words sounded rehearsed, as if she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. I glanced at Leo, who had finished his dessert and was now discreetly fiddling with a napkin. In his eyes I saw the same sadness I felt in my own heart. He too had just realized who his parents truly were, and that revelation had to be even more painful for a 9-year-old boy than it was for a 75-year-old man. "I love you too," I answered sincerely, because despite everything, a father's love isn't easily erased. But true love doesn't require special demonstrations or signed documents. True love is seen in the small actions, in the everyday moments, in honesty. Marcus coughed, uncomfortable with my words. Eleanor released my hand and began to clear the dessert plates with movements that were more abrupt than usual. The atmosphere had grown tense, and I knew the culminating moment was approaching. Soon they would bring out the papers. Soon they would try to execute their plan. But I was no longer the same man who had started this dinner. Leo's words had transformed me into something stronger, more cunning. I was no longer just Arthur Vance, the trusting grandfather. I was now a man who knew the truth and was prepared to fight back. "Dad, why don't we move to the living room? We'll be more comfortable to chat," Eleanor suggested after we'd finished our coffee. Her voice had that controlled cadence she used when she wanted to command a situation. Marcus had already stood up and was heading toward the front door, presumably to retrieve the briefcase from the car. Leo followed me to my favourite armchair, the worn leather one where Clara and I used to watch old movies after dinner. The boy sat on the small ottoman I always kept nearby, pretending to be drowsy, while his parents settled onto the sofa across from us. The scene felt familiar, yet now every detail carried a sinister weight. "It's a bit warm in here, don't you think, Dad?" Eleanor commented as she cracked open a window. I knew it wasn't warm. It was an excuse to have the window open, likely so the neighbours wouldn't hear if I resisted or shouted. Every move was calculated. Every word had a hidden purpose. Marcus returned with a black leather briefcase tucked under his arm. He placed it discreetly beside the sofa, but I saw Eleanor glance at it. There they were, the documents Leo had warned me about. The papers intended to steal my entire life with my own signature. "Arthur, I've been speaking with some colleagues at the bank," Marcus began, that dangerous smile plastered on his face. "And they all agree that at a certain age, it's crucial to have your financial documentation well organized. It prevents future problems, you understand?" I nodded slowly, feigning the interest of an old man concerned about his finances. "Of course, Marcus. At 75, one must be prudent." Leo yawned loudly and leaned against my leg, but I could feel his small body remained tense, alert. "Exactly," my son-in-law continued. "That's why we've prepared some documents that could make things easier for you. Nothing complicated. Just a few signatures that would allow Eleanor to help you with banking matters when you're tired or not feeling well." Eleanor moved from the sofa and knelt beside my chair, taking my hand just as she used to when she was a little girl, and wanted to ask me for something special. "Dad, you know I have a business degree, right? I could manage your investments better, make that money work harder for you. Times have changed, and the financial strategies now are very different from in your day." Her words sounded reasonable, almost convincing. If it weren't for Leo's warning, I might have even considered her proposal. After all, Eleanor had graduated with honours. She had worked at a financial firm for a few years before getting married. On the surface, it made sense for her to help me. "What kind of documents?" I asked, my voice that of an elderly man showing genuine interest.